This conference will now be recorded.
Where secrets lie.
Okay, you can hear me now?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay then. Okay, good afternoon. In previous classes, you have been already discussed regarding the pancreas, no? Today we'll go to discuss about pancreatic neoplasm. Kindly everybody mute. Okay. Before going to the neoplasms, just we'll have 4 slides regarding the anatomy of the pancreas so that it will be useful for you for the further remembrance. Okay. So pancreas weighs between 75 and 125 grams and measures 10 to 20 centimeters. You all know pancreas lies in the retroperitoneum, just anterior to the first lumbar vertebrae. It is divided into 4 portions: head, neck, body, and tail. This is the brief pictorial representation. Just remember the image. See, this is the pancreas. Okay. This is the C loop of the duodenum. Okay. You can see at the common bile duct. Later it will be posterior to this, so you cannot appreciate well. And tail of the pancreas related to the spleen. So just remember this image, the pancreas and its relations, and also the vascular structures. Okay. You can see here. Okay. Coming to the arterial supply, pancreas has multiple arteries. So the major arterial supply to the head and neck is from the superior pancreatico-duodenal artery and inferior pancreatico-duodenal artery. The superior pancreatico-duodenal artery is a branch of gastroduodenal artery. So this superior pancreatico-duodenal artery is again divided into anterior and posterior. So you can see here. This is the anterior one and this is the posterior one. Okay, this is the superior. From below, inferior. Inferior pancreatico-duodenal artery is the first branch of SMA, superior mesenteric artery. So this is also again divided into anterior and posterior. So both the superior and inferior is divided into anterior and posterior. And here in between there will be arcuates. Okay. For the body and tail, from the splenic artery, this great pancreatic artery, the caudal artery, and dorsal pancreatic artery, these all emerges and then supplies. So there will be multiple arcuates in the head and the body of the pancreas. Hence, it has a very rich blood supply. Coming to venous drainage, the venous drainage follows the arteries. And you also know the most common structure, that is a portal vein, is related to the pancreas. See, this is the superior mesenteric vein and the splenic vein. This joins to form the portal vein. Okay. And the inferior mesenteric vein drains into splenic vein. And if you can see here, this is the antero-superior pancreatico-duodenal vein. This is the posterior-superior. This is antero-inferior. Posterior-inferior also will be present here only. So this veins follows the similar pattern of the arterial supply. Usually anywhere in the body, the veins are superficial to arteries. So just remember these diagrams. Coming to lymphatic drainage, the lymphatic drainage from the pancreas is diffuse and widespread, which explains the high incidence of lymph node metastasis and local recurrence of pancreatic cancer. The pancreatic lymphatics also communicate with lymph nodes in the transverse mesocolon and mesentery of the proximal jejunum. So you can see here, the lymphatic drainage of the pancreas is spread all over, okay, and here also. So tumors in the body and tail of the pancreas are often unresectable because they metastasize to these lymph nodes. Coming to innervation. Innervation is also very important because in case of chronic pain in the pancreas, celiac block is the remedy. Okay. So the pancreas has a rich supply of efferent sensory fibers that travel superiorly to the celiac ganglion. If you can see here, this is the celiac ganglion. So interruption of these somatic fibers with a celiac plexus block can interfere with transmission of pancreatic pain. Even in cases of malignancies or in cases of chronic pancreatitis where the pain cannot be tolerable, you can go with the celiac plexus block. So coming to the proper chapter, pancreatic neoplasms. This is the types of pancreatic neoplasms. So you all know pancreas has both exocrine and endocrine part. So neoplasms occur in both exocrine and endocrine pancreas. So in exocrine pancreas, you should remember both two. One is the ductal adenocarcinoma and another is the cystic neoplasms. So if a question is given of write about pancreatic neoplasms, then you should mention about both the exocrine pancreas neoplasms and endocrine pancreas neoplasms. If only asked about the exocrine pancreas, then we have to write about this ductal adenocarcinoma and cystic neoplasms of the pancreas. Okay, so in this exocrine pancreas, the ductal adenocarcinoma is 90%. So it is most common adenocarcinoma, most common carcinoma of the pancreas. Next is the cystic neoplasms, which account for less than 1% of pancreatic cancers. So coming to endocrine pancreas, these are the pancreatic neuroendocrine tumors or islet cell tumors. These are mostly rare. So coming to carcinoma exocrine pancreas, you already saw it. Most common is ductal adenocarcinoma, that is 90%. This is the 9th most common cancer diagnosed. 4th in cancer deaths. Men are most commonly affected than women, that is 1.3:1 ratio. Africans and Americans have a slightly higher risk. Mean age of diagnosis is 72 years. Incidence is lowest in Middle East and in India. Next, we'll come to risk factors. Coming to environmental risk factors, smoking, known case of chronic pancreatitis, occupational exposure, like persons working in pesticide industries or in hydrocarbon industries are most commonly undergoes this pancreatic carcinomas. Next, diabetes, obesity, diet rich in protein and fat, infectious like H. pylori, genetic, and it is given that alcohol, coffee and radiation has no risk. Coming to hereditary factors. So these are the genes and the associated syndromes. So these are all associated with pancreatic carcinomas. So PRSS1, that is familial pancreatitis, STK11, Peutz-Jeghers syndrome, CDKN2A, familial atypical mole and multiple melanoma syndrome, CTFR, you already know, cystic fibrosis, BRCA2, hereditary breast and ovarian cancer, MLH1, Lynch syndrome, APC, familial adenomatosis polyposis colon syndrome. Okay, so these are all the hereditary risk factors for pancreatic carcinoma, apart from environmental risk factors. So let's go to the pathogenesis. Most of the cases are sporadic in nature. If you have completed colonic carcinoma, etc., the pathogenesis is also this pancreatic is also similar to that one only. That is, from intraepithelial neoplasia, the cells undergo changes and it develops in situ, then followed by invasive, and in each step some different genes are involved there. Okay, so there will be a sequential pathway has been observed in the development of PDAC from pancreatic intraepithelial neoplasia to invasive cancer. So genes identified are PDX1, KRAS2, CDKN2A, P16, P53. I think you know this is a tumor suppressor gene, and DPC4 or SMAD4. So first, these genes are there. No, in these genes, the KRAS2 gene first will be activated by point mutation, and this is the most common cause for this pancreatic cancers. So earliest event in tumorigenesis is activation of KRAS2 by point mutation. Later, progressive abnormality of the ductal epithelium from columnar metaplasia to carcinoma in situ occurs. Okay. So pancreatic intraepithelial neoplasia 1A, 1B, 2 and 3. In 1A, presence of columnar mucin producing ductal epithelium will be present. In 1B, there will be developmental of papillary architecture. In 2, evidence of nuclear atypia will be present. In 3, there will be carcinoma in situ. Marked cytological atypia will be present. with complete loss of polarity. Later it goes to invasive. This is the image, pictorial representation. See, you can see this. These are the normal cells. Okay, normal. Here first the KRAS mutation occurs. See how the cells are changing. Okay, with each mutation the cells are changing. There will be finally nuclear atypia and loss of nuclear polarity. Okay, so first pancreatic intraepithelial neoplasia 1A to 1B, KRAS. Okay, here from 1B to 2 to 3, in between there will be TDKN2A. Here there will be P53 DPC4 gene. Okay, this will be progressing later to carcinoma. So periampullary carcinoma. So what are the carcinomas which come under this periampullary carcinoma? If you can remember the picture which I have shown you in the first image, first slide, the adenocarcinomas of the head of the pancreas, ampulla of Vater, distal bile duct, and duodenum. These four are included in periampullary carcinoma. Simply how to remember the image, that the picture of the or anatomy of the pancreatic head, and then you can remember this very easily. Periampullary. So what are the structures present there? Obviously this head of the pancreas and the C loop of the duodenum. There will be ampulla of Vater and distal bile duct. So involving any of this tumor is periampullary carcinoma. So bile duct carcinomas are known as cholangiocarcinoma. Okay, so less commonly Isnard cell carcinomas or pancreatic endocrine neoplasms occur in the periampullary region of the pancreas. So these pancreatic endocrine neoplasms are very rare, and these Isnard cell carcinomas are very rare. So remember only these four adenocarcinomas. Okay. So what are the clinical representation? So you already saw there will be bile duct and the pancreatic duct. Okay. If periampullary tumors arise, what will happen? Bile flow will not be there. So obviously jaundice, the patient presents with jaundice, that is also obstructive jaundice. So most common presentation is 75% is jaundice. Later due to carcinoma, various changes occurs in the body which leads to cachexia, that is loss of weight, significant loss of weight like any other carcinoma, that is 51%. As a pancreatic tumors patient, unlike the periampullary carcinomas, other tumors will not be, the patients will not be presenting to us early. Okay, so weight loss will be the first symptom in those cases. In periampullary carcinomas, jaundice will be the first symptom. Later, the patient may also present with abdominal pain, nausea or vomiting. We have already previously seen, no, jaundice, that is obstructive jaundice, it causes pruritus. Okay, and then any cholangitis due to this obstructive jaundice. Any cholangitis means infection in the bile duct. Okay, so this leads to fever. Next is GI bleeding. These are the symptoms for periampullary carcinoma of the pancreas. Later we'll discuss about body and tail. So body and tail carcinomas, usually the patient does not present to you because it's a retroperitoneal structure and the tumor should be more large enough for that the patient can locate it, or the patient should feel some heaviness in his body, or the patient will present with the severe cachexia. Okay, so it's a late presentation, that is the tumor can grow how much it wants. So next, pain and weight loss are the most common. It is rare. Hence, the patient present at the later stages. So it will have poor prognosis. The prognosis of the pancreas is very, very pathetic, that only 18 months is the highest prognosis survival rate. So from 6 months to 18 months, it will be there for the patient. So let's see about some of the signs. Okay, I think you heard about Curvaceur's law. Okay, that means in a patient with jaundice with palpable gallbladder, the reason for this is not due to stones in the gallbladder, but due to CA pancreas or periampullary carcinoma. Because if there is a stone in the gallbladder, it leads to inflammation, which further leads to, anywhere inflammation occurs, it leads to fibrosis. So the gallbladder will not be distended in these cases. However, some exceptions are there for this law also, but in general, a distended gallbladder with the jaundice patient, then we have to see for the periampullary carcinoma. Okay, and other signs are left supraclavicular node, that is the virtuous node and Trocher's sign. This left supraclavicular node can also be seen in all the GI malignancies. Okay, this is due to the tumor seedling through the thoracic duct. Okay. Next is Sister Mary Joseph nodule, that is periumbilical lymphadenopathy. Okay. Next one is Blummer shelf. In distal rectal examination, you can note some hard nodules in the pouch of Douglas. Okay, this is due to the peritoneal seedling, transperitoneal spread. Okay, peritoneal dissemination. This is called Blummer shelf. Next is Trocher's sign, that is migratory superficial thrombophlebitis. So, investigations. As in every case, we do some routine investigations and specific investigations pertaining to the disease. So what are the specific investigations for this one? You have to have a hepatic function. LFT should be done, including the coagulation profile, and nutritional assessment is very much important. Another are CEA and CA99 tumor markers. Okay, this CA99 is more than diagnostic, it is more useful for prognostic purpose. It is most sensitive, most reliable tumor marker for pre-treatment evaluation and post-treatment surveillance. So remember, for pancreas, you do CA99, even bile duct also. CEA is anywhere mucin secreting, like our colon. You can do CEA also. Coming to imaging studies, the first and foremost investigation which is available everywhere is ultrasound abdomen, and it's an initial investigation. Next investigation is CT. So this is the imaging study of choice. We have to take a 3-phase CT. Okay, non-contrast, arterial phase, and venous phase, portal phase, with 3 mm slices, and 3D reconstruction should be made. So, in a case of pancreatic mass in CT, what are the things that we have to make a note? Okay, apart from the mass and the situation and the location and the size and etc., this is very much important. So CT is used for staging even. Okay, depending on the involvement of these vessels, as you have remembered in the first image, the vessels are very much related to the pancreas. So we have to check if that mass is extended to superior mesenteric artery, celiac axis, superior mesenteric vein, or portal vein complex. Okay, so we have to make a note, because depending on this only, our further surgical management will be present, whether it is a resectable or a borderline resectable or unresectable. Okay, next, what are the other things? That is, CT is used for staging, obviously. So what are the other things you do? Apart from the tumor and the involvement, T staging will be finished. You have to see the nodal staging, that how many lymph nodes are involved. Next, we have to assess for the metastasis. Okay, depending on all this, resectability will be predicted. See, this is the ultrasound, often the initial test for every symptomatic patient. Okay, in ultrasound per se, you can locate the mass, but you may not. It's not mostly useful, because all the masses cannot be seen due to some bubble gas shadowing, etc., and all the involved lymph nodes cannot be seen. But you can note for the ascites and if any liver metastasis is present. Okay. See, this is the pancreas. You can see portal vein, IVC, aorta. Normal one. I think you can see here some hypoechoic area. Okay, with some solid content inside. If any cyst is present, like how this is hypoechoic, very dark, like that it will be present, but in solid mass it will be present like this. Okay, echogenic material will be present. So that is a tumor. So coming to CT findings. See, like here. Okay, tumors present at the body and tail. I think you can appreciate it well. You can see here some tumor present here. Okay. Next, here the tumor is present in the head, but it is not encroaching the vessels. Okay, without involvement of celiac plexus or superior mesenteric artery. You can see here the tumor. Okay, in this image it is not clearly given. And this is the tumor with the involvement of the vessels. Okay, see, this is the arterial phase because this is the aorta and the contrast is given in CT. So this is enhancing. Okay, if you can see here, these are the vessels. Okay, and these are involved here. Okay, this is the splenic artery. This is the common hepatic artery. Okay, this is the pancreatic tumor. You can see this one. What are this T1, T2, T3, and T4? I will tell you in the further slides in staging. Next most important investigation is endoscopic ultrasound. Okay, so endoscopic ultrasound is more useful because in endoscopic ultrasound, if you want to do a FNAC, I mean cytology, you can take it easily. Okay, so apart from diagnostic, it can also be used to take cytology also. So it is more useful, beneficial for identifying small tumors less than 2 centimeters. Okay, if you can see here, this is the tumor and this is the SMV. You can see here, no, this fat plane is preserved. That means the tumor is not involving the SMV, so it can be resectable. Okay, next, if you can see here, this is the mass and this is the common bile duct. Okay, you can see here, there is no, see, this is very clear, the fat plane, but there is no clear plane like this. That means it is involving that one. And this is the mass again, this is the portal vein and the CBD. You can also see the CBD is very much dilated. Okay, that means it is involving both. So one more useful is tumor smaller than 2 centimeters can also be identified on endoscopic ultrasound. Okay, either it can be a radial or a linear. Two views. Next is the MRI. So per se role of MRI in pancreatic cancer is very less studied because CT is high. Okay, it does not appear to be superior to spiral CT scanning. The ability of MRI to demonstrate pancreatic adenocarcinoma largely depends on the demonstration of deformity of the gland as reflected in its size, shape, contour, and signal intensity characteristics. Okay, I don't know whether you can locate it or not. This is the tumor part, and it is involving the vessels. This is also MRI finding. So how does it appear? The normal pancreas is of low signal intensity on T1 weighted images and of intermediate signal on T2 weighted images with a variable amount of fat in the gland parenchyma. So T1 weighted fat suppressed image shows verified adenocarcinoma of the pancreatic head. Okay, adenocarcinoma. Generally, we don't prefer MRI because it is best for staging. Next, MRCP and ERCP, magnetic resonance cholangiopancreatography and endoscopic retrograde cholangiopancreatography. So MRCP, in MRCP, no dye is given, nothing is given. The patient is asked to have some 8 hours of fasting before the investigation is done, and the bile itself acts as a contrast. Okay, assessment of luminal pancreaticobiliary anatomy, useful for cystic lesions of the pancreas. ERCP, in ERCP, you can have a diagnostic, a therapeutic also. Okay, so you can perform a biopsy or a breast cytology, and you can have a therapeutic, that is stenting also can be done through ERCP. This is the ERCP. ERCP has 95% and 95% sensitivity and 85% specificity. Most pancreatic carcinomas arise from the ductal epithelium and produce complete or partial ductal obstruction. Okay, so stenting can be done at the same time. So you can see here the dilated radicals. Okay, so you can see here dilated. So in these cases, either a stenting can be done or a pancreatic duct sphincteroplasty can also, or sphincterotomy can be done. So MRI appears to be more valuable for staging the extent and spread of pancreatic carcinoma than for tumor detection of lesions smaller than 2 centimeters. If you can see here, two ductal opening. Okay, this is the pancreatic duct and this is the common bile duct. You'll see later, these are double duct signs. Okay. This MRCP is as sensitive as ERCP and may prevent inappropriate exploration of the pancreatic and bile ducts. You know that MRCP is an invasive treatment, non-invasive investigation, whereas ERCP is an invasive investigation. So obviously some complications will be there with ERCP later on. Okay. Until and unless any endoscopic therapy is required, so prevent ERCP and do MRCP. See, I have told in the previous slide, no, double duct sign, two ducts will be present. Okay, one is the pancreatic duct, one is the common bile duct. And you can see this abrupt cutoff. You can see this cutoff. Okay, the dilated common bile duct and dilated pancreatic duct are seen proximal to aberrant cutoff. There will be cutoff there due to the location of the tumor. This is the MRCP showing a dilated pancreatic duct. Okay, proximal to the obstructing head mass. This is in the ERCP. See, the same double duct sign. CBD, pancreatic duct, two ducts can be seen here. Usually they both join and open as a single duct. One more is the antral pad sign. Here, this is seen in upper GI barium studies. This reveals an extrinsic impression of the mass on the posterior inferior aspect of the antrum of the stomach and widened C-loop of the duodenum. See, this is the tumor. And if you can see, there will be antral pad sign. That is, it will there widening of the C-loop of the duodenum, and you can see this. This is the stomach. No, there will be antral lift up. Next is percutaneous transhepatic cholangiogram. This is usually not done. You can see here, dilated CBD. Okay. There might be a stricture or a carcinoma. Now coming to PERSA staging. So, T stage, N stage and M stage. TX is primary tumor cannot be assessed. T0 is no evidence of primary tumor. TIS is carcinoma in situ. T1 is tumor limited to the pancreas, 2 centimeters or smaller in greatest dimension. T2 is more than 2 centimeters. T3 is tumor extend beyond the pancreas but without involvement of celiac axis, superior mesenteric artery. See, for this only in CT, we have seen there. Okay, all these vascular structures should not be involved. So if these are not involved, then T3. If these are involved, T4. Involved means unresectable primary tumor. Okay. Next, lymph nodes. NX is regional lymph nodes cannot be assessed. N0 is no regional lymph node metastasis. N1 is regional lymph node metastasis is present. With distant metastasis, M0 is no distant metastasis. M1 is distant metastasis present. Next, coming to the staging. So 1A, 1B and 2A follows as T1, T2, T3 with N0 and M0. 2B is T1 to T3 with N1, M0. T3 is T4, NEN, M0. Stage 4 is NET, NEN, M1. Okay. So following CT imaging, these are classified into resectable, borderline resectable or unresectable tumors. So what are the resectable tumors? These resectable tumors are localized to the pancreas with no evidence of superior mesenteric vein or portal vein involvement and a preserved fat plain will be present. Next, coming to borderline resectable, severe unilateral or bilateral superior mesenteric with vein portal impingement will be present. Less than 180-degree tumor abutment on the SMA, abutment or encasement of hepatic artery. If reconstructible, SMV occlusion, if of a short segment and reconstructible. Usually, if involvement of artery is there, then you don't prefer to do a surgery. If vein is there, then it should be reconstructible, or there is no mean of in doing a surgery. So these are the three structures we have to make a note: SMV, SMA, hepatic artery, and even celiac block involvement is also, so celiac plexus involvement also very important. Next, coming to unresectable tumors. Other than these, there is a metastasis or including lymph node metastasis outside the field of resection, ascites, or any vascular involvement. These tumors are unresectable tumors. Let's see according to NCCN guidelines for pancreatic adenocarcinoma. What are the resectable, borderline resectable, unresectable? So in resectable, in head, body, and tail, no distant metastasis should be present. There should be a clear fat plane around celiac and superior mesenteric arteries. Next is patent superior mesenteric vein or portal vein. Okay, borderline. Nothing vessels is involved is resectable. Vessels involved with some conditions is borderline. Total involvement is unresectable. Remember easily. Okay, borderline resectability is in head and body with severe unilateral SMV or portal impingement, tumor abutment on SMA, gastroduodenal artery encasement up to origin at hepatic artery, tumors briefly involving the IVC, SMV occlusion if of a short segment with open vein, but both proximally and distally. Next is colon or mesocolon invasion. In tail, adrenal, colon or mesocolon or kidney invasion. Preoperative evidence of biopsy positive peripancreatic lymph nodes. These all comes under borderline resectable. Coming to unresectable, in head tumors, distant metastasis, SMA or celiac encasement, SMV or portal occlusion, aortic IVC invasion or encasement, invasion of SMV below transverse mesocolon. In body tumors, distant metastasis, SMA, celiac, hepatic encasement, SMV or portal occlusion, aortic invasion. Coming to tail, distant metastasis, SMA, celiac encasement, rib or vertebral invasion. Okay. I know you can't remember all this, just remember the major things. So, staging laparotomy. We usually don't prefer, but in case of in a CT, if you can't come to a particular diagnosis or you can't come to a point where you cannot choose the following treatment, then you can go for the staging laparotomy. Indications are large tumors more than 3 centimeters, significantly elevated CA19-9 level more than 100 units per ml, and some uncertain findings on CT, body and tail tumors. So before going to surgery or any treatment, first surgery, before going to surgery, you have to see for preoperative preparation. Very important in these cases. Correction of anemia is very important. Next is replenishment of glycogen store. Already the patients will be cachextic, and postoperatively pancreatic fistula is also the common complication. So if pancreatic fistula occurs, then you already know the pancreatic enzymes are flesh eating. So the patient will be still more cachextic. The patient cannot survive even. So replenishment of glycogen stores, nutritional assessment should be done, and nutritional parenteral or enteral nutrition should be given. Okay, and correction of dehydration. Injection of vitamin K. Adequate IV fluid should be given. Broad spectrum antibiotics 1-2 days prior should be given. Pulmonary physiotherapy and preoperative biliary drainage. It's still controversial, but in case of cholangitis, you have to do a stenting. Then only you can go for further treatment. So, treatment modalities. What are the treatment? If tumor is present in the head of the pancreas, you can do pancreatic or duodenectomy, either a Whipple's or a transverse and long metrosession. Either it can be open or a laparoscopic pancreatic or duodenectomy. If body and tail of the pancreas are involved, then you just do the distal pancreatectomy and the en bloc splenectomy. Okay, and then followed by anastomosis. So, what are the steps of pancreatic or duodenectomy? Okay, you can see this image, no? These 6 steps. Okay, first is the Kettlebratch maneuver. In this Kettlebratch maneuver, the right side of the organs are lifted. That is, the colon and the duodenum are lifted so that beneath that the retroperitoneal organs and the vessels can be easily visualized. Okay, right medial rotation of the visceral medial rotation. Next is extended Cocos maneuver. In Cocos maneuver, we usually mobilize the duodenum and all the peritoneal attachments to the duodenum are removed. In extended Cocos maneuver, it is extended. Okay, so that beneath that vessels, that is IVC and all can be అవును 2 slides అయిపోయింది 2 slides అయిపోయింది. Okay, extended Cocos maneuver is done. Later this portal dissection will be done and 3 steps are most important. That is transect the stomach here first. Okay, later transect the jejunum. Okay, and transect pancreas and complete this one, retroperitoneal dissection. So you have done the transection, then you have to do the anastomosis. Okay, first what you do, see, remember this image. Okay, and this one, see, you have transected the jejunum here, no, this part. Okay, this is brought up, this one. Okay, that one either you can do a end to end or a end is staple and this end to side. Okay, end to side pancreatico-jejunostomy is done. Then end to side hepatico-jejunostomy, that is side of the jejunum and end of this bile duct. Okay, end to side hepatico-jejunostomy followed by JJ, anticolic JJ. Okay, only difference is here end to end is done, here end to side is done. That is the only difference. So these are the structures removed: the distal stomach, gallbladder, CBD, head of pancreas, duodenum, proximal jejunum, and regional lymphatics. So following this, what are the complications? You know, anywhere gastric resection is done, you will have delayed gastric emptying, pancreatic fistula, wound infections, intra-abdominal abscess, cardiac events, bile leak. We have already previously seen bile leak, and overall reoperation for about 3%. Okay, these are some of the adjuvant therapies. I'll tell fastly. 5-fluorouracil with radiation. Different trials are there, and in this major 5-fluorouracil with radiation or adjuvant chemotherapy alone is improve survival. Each trials has given each impression. Okay, and some trials gave that gemcitabine is very much important. Some gave that gemcitabine is given before and after 5-fluorouracil has more survival rate. Palliative therapy, biliary obstruction, you can either go with biliary entry bypass or a stent is placed. GOO, luminal stenting can be done, or RONY, hepatico-jejunostomy and gastrojejunostomy is done. For pain relief, NSAIDs, celiac nerve block, neurolysis is done. These are the recent advances. Okay, vaccine is under trial. VEGF inhibitors like bevacizumab is also can be given with gemcitabine. KRAS inhibitor, tipifarnib is given. EGFR inhibitors, erlotinib is also given. Okay, in the next class, we'll go with cystic neoplasms of the pancreas. Thank you.